with the news that Greater Manchester and Lancashire are expected to be moved into Tier 3 of coronavirus restrictions. Also suggestions that London, as early as tomorrow, could move into Tier 2. We thought it was a good idea to get Dr. Hilary here to answer lots of the questions that you've been sending in. So, Hilary, good morning. Are you poised and ready?
Absolutely.
Let's kick off with the first one, then. So, neighbouring parts of the country have very different infection rates, it would seem. Is part of that this idea that herd immunity can occur in certain places?
No, only a few people have been exposed to COVID-19 so far. So herd immunity is not something we can rely on. We don't know if it exists at all. We don't know how long it lasts. If it does exist, we can't rely on it. If we did rely on it, it would be a massive experiment and quite a dangerous one. That's what most experts believe.
So one of the positives from the stats so far is that even though the hospitalisation numbers are going up and in some cases higher than back in March and April when we went into lockdown, the death rate at the moment is lower. Why is that? Is it because we've become better at treating symptoms and treating the conditions?
Well, we are better at treating moderate and severe symptoms with the drugs like dexamethasone. They do reduce the death rate in those very severely affected people. But, of course, the death rate lags behind the hospitalisation rate, which is going up. So people are ill for a long time with COVID-19. So down the line, 2-3 weeks' time, we may see a rising death rate, just like they're seeing in Belgium and France and Germany, rising numbers of cases and increased mortality. So it's a worry.
So, unfortunately, no reason to think we've got it cracked in that sense. Now, a vaccine is seen as the ultimate answer. We heard initially, didn't we, it could be Christmas, then Easter. Now they're saying it may be years away. Is that, in your view, the only way to stop lockdowns being needed?
No, a vaccine would be very useful, but it's not the only way to get out of a lockdown. What we need to do is have a strict lockdown, get the numbers down, and that gives us a chance at test and trace being effective. Right now, test and trace isn't effective. It isn't doing the trick that we want it to do, and people aren't self-isolating. We need to do both of those things. If we get people to socially distance better, if we can get test and trace up and running, if we can get people to obey what self-isolation means, we've got a chance of getting out of lockdown, but it might be more than 2 weeks.
Now, what about this idea of a circuit breaker 2-week lockdown, which is basically a national lockdown, isn't it, by any other name, just a short one? Boris Johnson saying, no, that would be the wrong thing to do. But now we hear that he's actually maybe considering one again over the half-term holidays.
Well, if you look at the numbers, 20,000 yesterday, 20,000 new cases, increased hospitalisations, a rising death rate. This is serious. If we don't get a handle on this, it's going to be a nightmare in 2, 3, 4 weeks from now. So a lot of people are thinking a short, sharp lockdown, which is strictly adhered to, is probably the way forward sooner rather than later.
OK, well, it won't surprise you to know we've got lots more questions for you to answer, so we'll carry on chatting to you throughout the show, if that's OK. But thanks very much indeed for now.
There is a lot of anxiety around at the moment. And Dr. Hilary, at the moment, we have one area which is in the highest tier of restrictions. But it looks like many of the rest of us might be hurtling towards that situation. Boris Johnson has said that a national lockdown would be miserable, but it looks like, you know, possibly it could happen by default, region by region.
Yeah, what happens in one region tends to be followed by what happens everywhere else. This is a national virus. The virus isn't favouring Liverpool or Manchester. The more people that meet up, the more it spreads. We're seeing rising numbers around the country. So the south is just behind the north. It was the inverse of what happened earlier in the year. So I think we should pull together and we should support one another. And if we're going to go into lockdown, I think it should be a national one. Get the numbers down, get the NHS prepared, increase capacity in intensive care. We can make a lot of planning. We can do a lot of planning now, which will help down the line in the future. But, you know, Rishi Sunak can say that another lockdown can do a great deal of harm, but we're in a pandemic. There's going to be harm either way, whether it's in health or whether it's in the economy. We have to face this is a really tough time. It's a major pandemic, and we have to accept there's going to be some pain and some harm.
As you mentioned, that's on the front of the Daily Telegraph this morning. I mean, this is now the conflict, isn't it, between those who are very concerned. Of course, everyone's very concerned about the pandemic and infections, but the way to deal with it without causing damage elsewhere.
Can I ask you a practical question on that as well, Hilary? I mean, they're all practical questions, aren't they? But a personal practical question.
Of course.
With the looming half-term, with a desire by everyone to do the right thing. I mean, nobody more than me wants to not... I desperately want to do the right thing. But we've got half-term coming up, and we're trying to work out, as a family, what I can do for the children. So... You know, if at the moment in Tier 1, there are certain things I'm allowed to do. If London moves to Tier 2, that changes. I have family that may be moving to Tier 3, in-laws and things. Can they travel? Can they not travel? It would be very helpful if decisions were made, wouldn't it, now? Because we're coming up to a period where it seems sensible, I'm sure, to the government to choose that for a circuit breaker. But actually, for those that are trying to manage doing the right thing, it's very, very complicated. And we've seen Wales have said that they don't want people travelling to them. Other parts have said that as well, other parts of the UK. So it's a right old pickle if you're trying to plan, to be honest.
And what people, I think, are seeking desperately is some certainty and some clarity. They want to know what they should be doing. And the bottom line is you can have all these tiers that you can't really impose very easily. But what people need to know is that the virus can only pass between human beings from one to another. So the sensible thing to do is to protect yourself and your family as much as you can by doing what you need to do. And I think one of those things is to avoid those people who are flouting the rules on a regular basis, those people who aren't wearing masks, who aren't socially distanced, and we see them in the news all the time.
Well, we had those pictures from Liverpool, didn't we, the night before last, just before Tier 3 was imposed.
Now, those people are frequently, on a daily basis, coming into contact with lots of other people. They are people that you need to avoid. And I say that in a microbiology way. You need to avoid them because they are a risk to you.
You say that, though, Hilary, but there are lots of places that people are being encouraged to go to support the economy, you know, the Rishi Sunak thing that we need to keep going. Places to go to, holiday camps, for want of a better thing, which tell you, when you phone up, that they've got the restrictions in place and it's all fine. However, the reality isn't clear whether that can work or not.
Well, there are plenty of hospitality areas. There are very good restaurants where social distancing is so strict.
Yeah.
And that's the place you want to go to. If you want to keep the economy going, do it in a responsible way. Certainly, have bars doing the right thing, have your restaurants serving food and having staggered leaving times, tables booked at different times so that not everyone gathers in the street afterwards and takes public transport at the same time. You can do this in a responsible and measured way. What you don't want are mass crowds protesting, abusing the police, abusing staff when they get to hospitals and making matters a lot worse.
Well, that's a very good point about the hospitals.
Yeah.
A doctor based in Liverpool has responded to those pictures of the crowds on Twitter. Dr. Junald Rathor is a consultant emergency physician in Merseyside. He said, "I am really scared. We are running out of intensive care beds and trolleys in corridors, and then such scenes, loss of words." I mean, the situation in Liverpool in particular is getting very serious. Liverpool hospitals could exceed healthcare capacity in the next week,
I think
according to one of the government's scientific advisors.
I think he posted that before it went into Tier 3, so one can only assume that actually things have got potentially more pressurised as well since he had those feelings of alarm.
I think we need to hear more of those voices of people working in A&E and intensive care. We hear so much about the data, about the stats. And actually, I think we've got so many amateur epidemiologists out there looking at stats saying, oh, but this is happening, that's happening. Talk to the frontline staff, see what it's really like at the coalface. They are really worried about what's going on. So all those people pretending it's not happening in the streets, rebelling, saying that we've got our individual freedoms and rights. This is a pandemic. Frontline staff are really worried.
It's concerning, though, isn't it? Because the government needs to do this with consent. People need to back the government on this. But when people feel that it's unfair or they're unsupported or their business or their livelihood is at risk, then we're starting to see a little bit of pushback. And I'll give you another example, Dr. Hilary. There's a gym in Liverpool which has been fined £1,000 for staying open after those Tier 3 restrictions came in. And 7 police officers with tasers turned up. Now, tasers wouldn't have been needed. They just happened to be wearing their tasers. But that's quite a sight, isn't it, if you're running a gym and those police officers turn up at the Body Tech gym. So the owner...
Definitely shows they mean business, doesn't it?
Absolutely right.
We're kind of shocked when we see this in the UK. This is commonplace in Italy. Police will come and make sure that you're self-isolating when you're told to. We're seeing much more stringent rules applied in Germany, in China, in Russia. And we're shocked because we don't normally do this. What we normally do is we count on the agreement of the population, if you like, to do the right thing.
I know, but Hilary, you said there are plenty of places doing it well. The point of the gym owner is he was absolutely sticking by the rules, he said. He'd done the right thing. He'd made it, you know, he'd made it safe for people to go to the gym and exercise.
We've got Nick Wickham, the gym owner. Should we just have a little listen?
Yeah.
We have just received our first £1,000 fine at Body Tech. After meeting with the police yesterday, they told us we'd get warning first day and a second warning, £100 fine, £200 fine and so on. They were with us this morning, gave us a warning, come back this afternoon, orders from their top boss, issue a fine straight away. So they told us close immediately or take £1,000 fine. Obviously we still had quite a lot of members training. I said to the officers, I said, I'm not asking anybody to leave. Even if I am, I'm going to let them finish their sessions first. Gyms need to stay open. Ireland have gone into complete lockdown and they've kept gyms open as one of the only things that they've left open in the whole of the country, because they know how important it is. They know how vital it is to our physical and mental health.
I mean, this plays into this sort of mixture of callings on individuals, isn't it? There's a calling of, you know, get yourself sorted, retrain, skill up, be prepared, make sure your business is COVID ready to deal with anything. He feels he has. He feels that he, you know, wasn't given enough warning for the rules to change. So he's standing up to police. The police, on the other hand, are on huge pressure to enforce the rules so that we can stay safe. So there's going to be conflict, isn't there?
Yeah, I don't know the circumstances of this individual case. What I do know is that if you've got an environment where you've got poor ventilation, people can't socially distance, cleaning isn't happening as it should be, and maybe it is there. I can't comment on that, but you know, it has to be a safe environment, and I think somewhere local authorities have to make a stand and say, look, these are the rules. We need you to abide by them. If you're completely flouting them openly,
I don't think
you're
it's
rebelling.
I don't think. I think the point is that under Tier 3, gyms have to close. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're over secure or not.
You know,
your gym has to close down. I think there is
basically.
There is an issue though, isn't there, about people trying to stay healthy and fit and well, and then all of a sudden they can't go to the gym. There's a petition that's been put online, 120,000 signatures, calling on the government to prevent closing them down when an area goes into Tier 3 restrictions. You know, once again, you know, as Kate says, you're trying to do the best. You're trying to run your business. You're trying to keep it safe, and you would elsewhere in the country. All of a sudden, you're told to close it down.
I have every sympathy.
It's the place where you think you're going to stay healthy. Yeah,
I have every sympathy, and I think we have to be adaptable in this pandemic. So if you want to exercise, there are safe ways of doing that. But I don't think downstairs in an enclosed space in a gym is probably the safest place to be. I think out in the forest, out in the field, even in the street, just jogging, cycling, there are safer ways of exercising.
Which, of course, then doesn't help the gym owner, but it plays into what you said originally, Hilary, which is we need clarity. We need decisions made and clarity so that people can respond to that.